6 years ago, my sister stole the millionaire I was about to marry at our mother's funeral. She walked in with him, flashing her diamond ring and smirking at me. She said, "I took the man, the money, and the mansion, and you're still alone at 38. So I calmly said, "Have you met my husband?" And when he stepped forward, her face went completely pale. My name is Rebecca Wilson. And if there is one thing I've learned in my 38 years on this earth, it's that the people who say they love you the most are often the ones holding the sharpest weapons. I found myself standing under the gray, weeping sky of a Boston afternoon, clutching a black umbrella that was doing absolutely nothing to stop the chill from seeping into my bones. I was standing outside the funeral home, dreading the moment a black town car would pull around the corner. I was there to bury my mother, the only person who had ever truly understood me. But I was also bracing myself for a collision with my past. It had been 6 years. 6 long, grueling years since my sister, Stephanie, decided that my life looked better than hers, so she simply took it. 6 years since she seduced Nathan, the man I was planning to grow old with. I hadn't seen either of them since the day I packed my life into cardboard boxes and fled the state. When the car finally pulled up, I watched them step out. Stephanie was first, flashing a massive diamond ring that caught the dull light, wearing a smirk that screamed, "I won." Then Nathan followed, looking older, heavier, but still wearing that arrogance like a second skin. When they saw me, I felt a calm wash over me that I never expected. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Because she had absolutely no idea who was waiting inside to meet her. She thought she was walking in to pity me. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. But before I tell you how my sister's face turned as white as a ghost when she saw the man standing next to me, you need to understand the wreckage she left behind. You need to understand what it feels like to have your entire reality dismantled, brick by brick, by the two people you trusted most. Let's rewind. My mother, Eleanor, was the anchor of my existence. We grew up in a modest, clapboard suburban home just outside of Boston. She was the kind of woman who taught you that dignity wasn't about how much money you had in the bank, but how you carried yourself when the world was trying to knock you down. She was the glue, the peacemaker. Even after I moved into my own high-rise apartment in downtown Boston and clawed my way up the corporate ladder to become a marketing executive, she was my first call every morning. 7 a.m. sharp. Coffee in hand. She was my confidant, my advisor, and my biggest cheerleader. When the doctors told us she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, I felt the ground dissolve beneath my feet. It was a fast, brutal diagnosis. But true to form, Mother faced it with a grace that made me feel humbled. She spent her final weeks worrying about us, about whether my father was eating, about whether I was happy rather than her own suffering. She slipped away holding my hand in the same bedroom where she'd read me bedtime stories, making me promise, with her last breath, to find peace. "Don't let the anger eat you, Rebecca," she had whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Promise me." I promised. But 6 years earlier, peace was the last thing on my mind. At 32, my life seemed perfect on paper. I was the envy of my friends. I had the career, the friends, the nice apartment. But I was lonely. I worked 60-hour weeks, ate takeout salads at my desk, and dated men who were either intimidated by my ambition or bored by it. Then I met Nathan Reynolds. We met at a charity gala through my college friend, Allison. Nathan was electric. He was a self-made tech millionaire at 36, with the kind of success story that business magazines love to feature on their covers. He had a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo and a confidence that sucked the air out of the room. Our connection was immediate and intense. We talked for 4 hours straight that night, ignoring the champagne, ignoring the music, ignoring everyone else. After our first date, a private dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, I called my mother, giddy as a teenager. "Mom, I think I've met someone. Someone special." Our relationship moved at warp speed. It was a whirlwind of weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, box seats at the symphony, and surprise jewelry boxes waiting on my pillow. Nathan was attentive, generous, and seemingly perfect. After 18 months together, during a private dinner on a chartered yacht, Nathan dropped to one knee. He opened a velvet box to reveal a 5-carat diamond ring that sparkled so brightly it almost hurt to look at. Rebecca, he said, his blue eyes shining, make me the happiest man in the world. I said yes without a second of hesitation. My parents were thrilled. My mother immediately began envisioning the perfect wedding, lilies, a string quartet, the works. Nathan had the resources to make any dream come true, and for the first time in my life, I let myself be swept away by the fantasy. And then there was Stephanie. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and to say we had a complicated relationship is the understatement of the century. Since we were kids, Stephanie viewed my life as a catalog of things she wanted. If I got a doll, she wanted my doll, not a new one. If I got an A, she needed an A+. If I made a new friend, she had to charm them until they liked her better. Mother always tried to keep the peace, giving each of us special time, but she couldn't erase Stephanie's innate, clawing need to best me. Despite our history, I chose Stephanie as my maid of honor. I thought, we're in our 30s now. We're adults. Surely, we've moved past childish jealousy. Mother said it would bring us closer, and I desperately wanted to believe her. When I first introduced Stephanie to Nathan at a family dinner, the dynamic was strange from the start. She complimented him excessively. "Oh, Nathan, that is fascinating," she would say, leaning across the table, her eyes wide, playing the role of the adoring audience. I noticed her touching his arm while laughing at his jokes, a lingering touch, just a second too long. But I dismissed it. She's just being charming, I told myself. She wants to make a good impression on her future brother-in-law. We held our engagement party at my parents' colonial-style home. It was a beautiful night, fairy lights strung through the trees, champagne flowing. Stephanie had helped Mother with the decorations, and she looked stunning in a red dress that was perhaps a bit too bold for the occasion. Throughout the evening, I caught Stephanie watching Nathan across the room. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory. But whenever our eyes met, she would quickly plaster on a bright smile and raise her glass to me. Later that night, as the last guests were leaving, Mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. She was arranging leftover appetizers into containers, her brow furrowed. "Rebecca, dear," she started, her voice careful. I noticed. Well, Stephanie seems quite taken with Nathan. I was washing champagne flutes in the sink, scrubbing a little harder than necessary. "She's just being friendly, Mom," I replied. "Besides, she's dating that pharmaceutical rep, Brian. She's happy." Mother nodded, but she didn't look convinced. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, looking out the window into the dark backyard. "Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can get when you have something she admires. She doesn't always know when to stop." I kissed her cheek, dismissing her worry. "We're adults now, Mom. Stephanie loves me. She's happy for me. I'm sure of it." God, I was so naive. I was walking into a buzzsaw with my eyes closed. 3 months before the wedding, the atmosphere shifted. It started with subtle changes in Nathan. He began working later and later. "International clients," he'd say. "Time zones are a nightmare." He was answering texts at odd hours, 11 p.m., 1 a.m., shielding his screen whenever I walked into the room. Our usual Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled due to emergency board meetings. When we were together, he seemed distracted. He was physically present, but mentally, he was miles away. But more concerning was the criticism. Suddenly, things he used to love about me became annoyances. "Rebecca, do you have to laugh so loudly?" "We're in public," he snapped one night at dinner. "I thought you liked my laugh," I said, hurt, shrinking into my seat. "It's just piercing," he muttered, taking a sip of wine and looking anywhere but at me. My favorite blue dress, the one he used to say made my eyes pop, now made me look washed out. My habit of reading before bed kept him awake. It felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own relationship, constantly trying to adjust myself to fit his narrowing standards. I was shrinking myself to fit into the space he was leaving for me. Meanwhile, Stephanie was suddenly the most helpful maid of honor in history. She called constantly. "How are the flowers coming? What about the cake? I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister," she'd say. Though Mother was handling most of the planning, Stephanie volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend due to work. "Don't worry about the DJ meeting, Beck," she'd text. "I'll go with Nathan. Focus on your presentation." One Thursday evening, Nathan and I were having dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. The silence between us was deafening. He barely made eye contact, responding to my stories about work with one-word answers. When his phone buzzed for the 5th time in 10 minutes, I reached my limit. Is there something more important happening elsewhere? I asked, trying to keep my voice light, though my stomach was churning with anxiety. Sorry, just work stuff, he muttered, quickly flipping his phone face down on the tablecloth. You know how it is before a product launch. Stress is high. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Later that week, I was doing laundry and picked up one of Nathan's dress shirts. As I went to put it in the machine, a scent hit me. It wasn't the detergent. It was perfume. Floral, heavy, musky. Nothing like the light citrus scent I wore. I marched into the living room, holding the shirt like it was contaminated evidence. Nathan, why does your shirt smell like perfume? He didn't even look up from his laptop. Oh, that. I was in meetings all day with a potential investor, Rebecca Mills. She wears this overpowering stuff. She hugged me goodbye. It gave me a headache. Rebecca Mills. Even the name was a convenient coincidence. The explanation was smooth, practiced. It was plausible enough that I felt guilty for even asking. I called my friend Allison the next morning for coffee, pouring my heart out. Every relationship gets jittery before the wedding, Allison reassured me, stirring her latte. Parker and I fought constantly the month before our wedding. We almost called it off twice. Now we've been married 5 years. It's just cold feet, Rebecca. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't dissolve. It was a heavy, cold stone sitting in my gut. I started making more effort. I booked a couple's spa day. I bought expensive new lingerie. I cooked his favorite meals from scratch. The more I tried, the more distant he became. He was like a ghost in our house. Then came the cake tasting. Nathan had been looking forward to it for weeks. He had a massive sweet tooth. That morning, he called me at work. I can't make it, babe, he said, sounding rushed. Unexpected crisis with the investors. I have to be on a conference call. But Nathan, we have to pick the flavor today, I said, fighting back tears. We're running out of time. Stephanie can go with you, he suggested instantly. She knows my preferences anyway. She knows I like the lemon chiffon. I froze. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. How did my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Okay, I'll take Stephanie. The next day, I was cleaning Nathan's car. He was driving my SUV while his was in the shop, so I thought I'd be nice and detail his sports car. I was vacuuming between the passenger seat and the center console when I heard a clink. I reached down, digging my fingers into the crevice, and pulled out an earring. It wasn't just any earring. It was a dangling silver drop with a tiny sapphire. My heart stopped. I recognized it immediately. It was Stephanie's. She had worn those exact earrings to my engagement party. They were a gift from our grandmother. I sat in the driver's seat of his Porsche, holding the earring, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Why was Stephanie's earring wedged in the passenger seat of Nathan's car? When I showed Nathan the earring that evening, his face remained perfectly composed. He didn't even blink. He didn't stutter. Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist last week, he said smoothly. She mentioned losing an earring. You never told me you drove Stephanie to the florist, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind. It wasn't important. When I called Stephanie, her explanation matched his perfectly. Too perfectly. Oh, thank goodness. I've been looking everywhere for that earring. Nathan was kind enough to drive me since my car was in the shop. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were racing like a hamster on a wheel. Had they rehearsed their story? Was I being paranoid? Was I going crazy? I lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks from the stress. Dark circles formed under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I started seeing a therapist without telling Nathan because I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan dropped a bomb. I'm worried about you, Rebecca, he said one evening, touching my arm with a concern that felt strangely detached, clinical. You're not yourself lately. Maybe we're rushing things. Maybe we should postpone. I broke down. I sobbed. I begged him to tell me what was wrong, what I had done, how I could fix it. He held me, assuring me everything was fine, but his eyes were vacant. He was there, but he wasn't there. That night, I woke at 3 o'clock in the morning to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. From the hallway, I heard his hushed voice coming from the guest bedroom. Not now. She'll hear us. I know. I know. Soon, I promise. I stayed frozen in bed, tears soaking my pillow. Who was he talking to at 3 a.m.? I knew the answer, but my heart wasn't ready to accept it. The next day, I decided to surprise Nathan at his office with lunch. Maybe I was looking for reassurance. Maybe I was looking for evidence. My father, Thomas, called as I was leaving my apartment. Rebecca, are you eating properly? Your mother says you've lost too much weight. We're concerned. I'm fine, Dad. Just pre-wedding jitters. I'm actually bringing Nathan lunch right now. Good. That boy better be treating my daughter like a queen, he grumbled. If only he knew. The security guard at Nathan's building recognized me and waved me through with a smile. On the elevator ride to the 12th floor, I checked my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked exhausted. I tried to smooth the worry lines that had etched themselves between my eyebrows. The lunch bag in my hand contained Nathan's favorite sandwich from the deli across from my office. A peace offering. When I reached the reception area, Nathan's secretary, Margot, looked up from her computer. Her eyes went wide, and her face went pale. Rebecca, we weren't expecting you today. Her gaze darted to Nathan's closed office door, then back to me frantic. Nathan is in a meeting right now. That's okay, I said, lifting the lunch bag, trying to smile. I just brought him lunch. I can wait. Margot stood quickly, practically leaping over her desk to block my path. Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could let him know you're here. Just wait here. Something in her nervous manner, the way she was physically blocking the hallway, triggered my suspicions. It was the final puzzle piece. Is he alone in there, Margot? I asked, my voice cold. Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Before she could respond, I sidestepped her. I'm going in. I walked to the heavy oak door. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me burned itself into my memory forever. It is the nightmare I still have sometimes, years later. Nathan was leaning against his mahogany desk. My sister, my little sister, my maid of honor, was standing between his legs. Her arms were wrapped around his neck, her hands tangled in his hair. Her skirt was pushed up. His tie was loosened. They were locked in a kiss so passionate, so familiar, that it was obvious this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a relationship. Neither of them noticed me at first. I stood there for several excruciating seconds, absorbing every detail. The way her hand rested on his chest. The way he held her waist. The intimacy of it was sickening. Then the door clicked shut behind me. They sprang apart like they'd been electrocuted. Three faces frozen in a tableau of shock. Rebecca, Nathan stammered, straightening his tie, his face flushed red. This isn't what it looks like. Stephanie didn't even attempt such a transparent lie. She smoothed her skirt, her face shifting from shock to defiance in a split second. She lifted her chin. We didn't plan this. It just happened. The calm that washed over me was surprising. It was the calm of total devastation. How long? I asked. My voice remained steady, contrasting sharply with the chaotic storm inside me. Nathan glanced at Stephanie, then back to me, looking like a cornered rat. Rebecca, let's discuss this privately. How long? My voice rose slightly, cutting through the air. For months, Stephanie answered, her voice cold, matter of fact. Since the engagement party. For months. While I'd been selecting wedding invitations, choosing floral arrangements, and crying over wedding dresses, they had been betraying me. While I was defending her to my mother, she was sleeping with my fiancé. Nathan moved behind his desk, distancing himself physically, slipping back into CEO mode. I didn't mean for this to happen, Rebecca, he said, sounding almost annoyed that I had interrupted. Sometimes feelings change. I was going to tell you after. After what? I snapped. After the wedding? After our honeymoon? After I was pregnant. I was trying to find the right time, he said, his voice taking on that practiced smoothness he used for difficult client meetings. The lunch bag dropped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound was deafening in the quiet office. I trusted you, I whispered, looking from him to her. Both of you. Stephanie at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting her weight. It just happened, Becca. We tried to fight it. Don't call me Becca, I hissed. The childhood nickname felt like another violation. And nothing just happens for 4 months. You made choices. Every secret call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye, knowing what you were doing. You chose this. Nathan pressed the intercom button on his desk. Margot, please come in. Moments later, Margot appeared, looking terrified, pointedly avoiding my gaze. Please escort Rebecca out, Nathan said, adjusting his cuffs. She's upset. I'm escorting myself out, I said, my dignity somehow intact despite feeling shattered inside. I looked at my sister, then at the man I thought I loved. You deserve each other. In the elevator, the tears finally came. By the time I reached my car, I was struggling to breathe between sobs. The drive home remains a blur in my memory. I only remember calling my mother from my apartment, curled on the bathroom floor, unable to form coherent sentences through my crying. Mother and father arrived within the hour, using their emergency key to enter when I couldn't bring myself to open the door. Mother held me while I told them everything, rocking me back and forth like I was a child again. Father paced the living room, his face growing redder with each detail. I'll kill him, he muttered, hand over his heart. Both of them. I swear to God, Eleanor. Thomas, your blood pressure, Mother warned, though her own face showed equal fury. The next days passed in a haze of pain. Mother helped me call vendors to cancel wedding arrangements, while Father handled the financial aspects. When I returned the engagement ring to Nathan's apartment, leaving it with the doorman because I couldn't bear to see him, I found Stephanie had already moved her things in. Most of her clothes were there, family photos arranged on shelves that once held mine. Nathan's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, mentioning that Stephanie had helped him catalog my remaining belongings. The betrayal ran deeper than I initially realized. Through mutual friends, I learned they had been meeting secretly whenever I worked late or traveled for business. Stephanie had pursued him deliberately, finding excuses to see him alone, sending texts and photos when I wasn't around. The scandal spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends sided with me, others with Nathan, citing his influence in the business community. Several admitted they'd noticed flirtation between Nathan and Stephanie, but hadn't wanted to get involved. Their cowardice stung almost as much as the betrayal. Mother became my lifeline during those dark months. She brought food when I couldn't eat, listened to my tearful rants, and stayed overnight when the loneliness became unbearable. She tried repeatedly to mediate between Stephanie and me, inviting us both to family dinners that inevitably ended in tense silence or bitter arguments. During one such dinner, Stephanie snapped after I refused to pass her the salt. You always got everything first, Rebecca, she yelled, slamming her hand on the table. The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did. My fiancé wasn't a prize to be won. I screamed back, my voice shaking. He was the man I loved and trusted. Mother put her fork down. Stephanie Marie Thompson. Apologize to your sister right now. For what? Stephanie sneered. Being honest? Nathan chose me. He loves me now. I stood up, throwing my napkin onto my plate. I can't do this anymore. Mom, I'm sorry. It was the last family dinner I attended with Stephanie present. My father's heart problems worsened from the stress of his daughter's feud, requiring medication adjustment and additional doctor visits. Mother aged years and months, the lines around her eyes deepening as she tried desperately to hold her family together. 6 months after discovering Nathan and Stephanie's betrayal, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression. My work suffered. I lost a major client after a disastrous presentation where I broke down crying in front of a boardroom of strangers. My boss suggested a leave of absence, but I knew staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only prolong my suffering. I needed to run. I needed to vanish. When a marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, I applied immediately. The interview went surprisingly well, my desperation for change perhaps reading as enthusiasm. 2 weeks later, I received the offer. Mother helped me pack my apartment, carefully wrapping photos and mementos in tissue paper. As we sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate, she broached the subject that hung between us. Will you ever consider forgiving Stephanie? She asked, sealing a box with packing tape. I continued folding sweaters without looking up. I don't know, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it, she said softly. It's about freeing yourself. I am freeing myself, I said, zipping up a suitcase. I'm moving to Chicago. Mother sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. Running away isn't the same as healing, sweetheart. Tears filled my eyes. I need space to even begin to heal. Can you understand that? She nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. Promise you'll call. Promise you won't shut us out completely. I promise. Saying goodbye to my parents was harder than I anticipated. Father held me longer than usual, his voice gruff with emotion. You show them, kiddo. Build a life so good they'll choke on their regret. My first weeks in Chicago were lonely and doubt-filled. My studio apartment felt sterile and unfamiliar. I worked long hours to avoid going home to empty rooms, eating takeout at my desk, and falling into bed exhausted each night. Then came the news that twisted the knife deeper. Mother called one Sunday morning, her voice cautious. Rebecca, I feel you should hear this from me rather than social media. Stephanie and Nathan got married yesterday. The small civil ceremony had been featured in Boston Magazine's society pages. Nathan's business connections ensured coverage despite the modest scale. The accompanying photo showed them beaming outside the courthouse. Stephanie was wearing a simple white dress, and my former engagement ring, the one I had worn, the one he had promised to me, was prominently displayed on her finger. That night was my lowest point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, scrolled through old photos of Nathan and me, and cried until my eyes swelled shut. I called in sick to work the next day, unable to face the world. But something shifted during those dark hours alone. As morning light filtered through my blinds, I made a decision. This would be the last day I gave them power over my happiness. I deleted all photos of Nathan from my phone. I blocked both him and Stephanie on every social media platform. I took a long shower, imagining my pain washing away down the drain. I didn't know it then, but my life was about to change. I thought my story was over. I thought the best years of my life had been stolen. I had no idea that the best was yet to come, and his name was Zachary. At work, I became a machine. My boss noticed the change immediately, assigning me to the agency's most significant clients. I developed a reputation for creativity and a borderline obsession with detail. I earned respect in my new office, not because of who I was dating, but because of what I could do. My first real friend in Chicago was Madison Reynolds, no relation to Nathan, thank God, our HR director. She invited me to her book club, and through her, I slowly started building a social circle. Madison frequently tried to set me up on dates, but I declined every single offer. The thought of romantic vulnerability was still terrifying. I was like a wounded animal, snapping at anyone who tried to get too close. For months into my new life, I was sent to a technology conference in San Francisco. On the second evening, I attended a stuffy business dinner with potential clients. I was seated next to a man named Zachary Foster. Zachary was different. Where Nathan had been flashy, loud, and charming in that used car salesman kind of way, Zachary was understated. He was a tech investor and entrepreneur who had recently relocated from Seattle. He had a quiet confidence that drew people in without him having to shout. When he spoke about his work, his passion was evident, but he never boasted. He asked me questions, real questions, and actually listened to the answers. He asked for my card after dinner, and I gave it to him without a second thought. To my surprise, he emailed the next morning. No games. No wait 3 days rule. Just a simple note asking if I'd like to continue our conversation about digital marketing trends over coffee before the day's sessions began. Over the next 3 months, Zachary and I maintained a professional orbit. He referred clients to my agency. I introduced him to my Chicago business connections. Madison noticed our frequent work lunches and raised an eyebrow over her salad one day. He likes you, Rebecca, she said, pointing her fork at me. And not just professionally. We're just colleagues, I insisted, though I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you, she smirked. Trust me. Eventually, Zachary asked me to dinner. A real dinner. Not a let's discuss Q3 projections dinner. I panicked. I almost canceled twice. I was staring at my phone, thumb hovering over the send button on a cancellation text, when I forced myself to put the phone down and go. 20 minutes into the date, we were discussing our favorite books, and it hit me. A full-blown panic attack. The restaurant was too loud. The candle on the table reminded me of the candles at the Italian place with Nathan. My chest tightened. My hands started shaking so bad I had to put my water glass down. I couldn't breathe. Tears welled in my eyes. I braced myself for him to be annoyed, to check his watch, to make a joke. Instead, Zachary slid his chair around the table to sit right beside me. He didn't touch me, he sensed I needed space, but he spoke calmly, his voice a low rumble that cut through the noise. Breathe, Rebecca. Just focus on my voice. You're safe. We can leave right now. He drove me home without asking a single prying question. The next day, flowers arrived at my office. Not red roses, but wildflowers. The card read, "No pressure, no expectations. Just hoping you're feeling better. Zachary." That evening, I called him. I told him everything. About Nathan. About Stephanie. About the betrayal that had hollowed me out. He listened without interrupting once. Then, he shared his own story, a marriage that ended when his wife left him for his business partner, taking half their joint company in the divorce. Broken trust leaves scars, he said softly. Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't a straight line. We built a foundation on friendship first. Zachary never pushed. He respected my boundaries while remaining steadfastly present. For our fifth date, he cooked dinner at his apartment instead of taking me to a crowded restaurant that might trigger my anxiety. For the first time since Nathan, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, trust was possible again. 1 year after moving to Chicago, I barely recognized my life. I had been promoted to senior marketing director with a corner office overlooking the river. And I had fallen deeply, terrifyingly in love with Zachary Foster. Unlike Nathan's flashy courtship, Zachary's love showed up in the small things. He remembered that I preferred oat milk in my coffee. He knew which true crime podcasts I was obsessed with. Most importantly, he never compared me to anyone else. In June, Zachary surprised me with a weekend trip to Michigan's wine country. On our last evening, walking through a garden filled with early summer blooms, he stopped beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses. "Rebecca," he said, taking both my hands in his. "This past year, knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life." When he knelt, producing a ring box from his pocket, a flash of panic hit me. Images of Nathan's proposal threatened to overshadow the moment. But then I looked into Zachary's eyes. I saw sincerity. I saw safety. "I'm not asking for an answer today," he said, reading my hesitation perfectly. "I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year, I'll be here." Tears filled my eyes, but not from fear. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready now." The ring was nothing like the ostentatious, "Look at me" diamond Nathan had given me. It was a simple emerald with small diamonds on either side. Elegant. Understated. Real. We planned a small wedding, only 30 guests at a historic Chicago venue. At Mother's urging, I sent Stephanie an invitation. It was an olive branch, a gesture toward healing. Her response came via email, brief and cold, "Congratulations. Unfortunately, Nathan and I have prior commitments. Best wishes." I wasn't surprised. I was actually relieved. Our wedding day was intimate and joyful. My father walked me down the aisle, whispering, "I haven't seen you this happy in years, kiddo." It wasn't until a few months later, at a dinner with some business associates, that I learned the truth about Zachary's past. Connection to my ex. A venture capitalist mentioned working with Nathan years earlier. Reynolds, yeah, the man laughed, swirling his scotch. He and Foster had quite the rivalry in the angel investing space about 7 years back. Foster backed the right startup. Reynolds backed the competitor. Foster's pick got acquired for millions. Reynolds took a bath on that one. Nearly went bankrupt. Later that night, I asked Zachary about it. "I was going to tell you eventually," he admitted, pulling me close on the sofa. "I knew who you were when we met at that conference. Not the details of the affair, but I knew you had been engaged to Reynolds. I knew he was an idiot for letting you go. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted you to know me for me, Rebecca. Not as someone connected to your past." I wasn't angry. Somehow, the cosmic symmetry felt right. 2 years into our marriage, we began trying for a baby. Months passed without success, leading to fertility specialists and difficult conversations. Through every disappointment, Zachary remained my rock. Then came the call that stopped time. "It's cancer, Rebecca," my father sobbed into the phone. Stage 4. Zachary and I flew to Boston immediately. Mother put on a brave face, but the cancer was aggressive. I took a leave from work to care for her, moving temporarily back to my childhood home. In her final weeks, Mother and I had precious conversations about life, love, and forgiveness. One evening, as I adjusted her pillows, she grabbed my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were fierce. "I wish you girls could find peace," she whispered. "Life is too short for such distance between sisters. Promise me you'll try, Rebecca. Not for her. For yourself." I promised, not knowing if I could keep it. Mother passed peacefully 3 days later. Zachary, father, and I were at her bedside. I called Stephanie immediately. "Mom's gone," I said. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "I'll be there in an hour." The real test, however, wouldn't be the phone call. It would be the funeral. That was where my past and my present were about to collide in a way none of us could have predicted. The air in the funeral home was thick with the scent of lilies and damp wool. I stood by my father, holding his arm to keep him steady. Then, the doors opened, and the moment I had been dreading for 6 years finally arrived. Stephanie and Nathan walked in. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room like a wave. Stephanie was dressed in a sleek, expensive black dress that hugged every curve, dripping in diamonds that caught the low light. Nathan was beside her in a tailored suit, his hand on the small of her back. But up close? Up close, the picture wasn't so perfect. Nathan's face was puffy, his eyes darting around the room nervously. Stephanie's smile was too bright, too tight. She looked brittle, like she might shatter if someone tapped her too hard. They offered stiff condolences to my father, avoiding my gaze until the last possible second. But Stephanie couldn't help herself. She needed to twist the knife one last time. "Rebecca," she said, her voice cool and assessing. "I need to speak with you. Privately." I followed her into a small side room away from the mourners. As soon as the door clicked shut, the mask slipped. She looked me up and down with a pitying sneer. "You look tired," she said, twisting that massive ring on her finger. "Nathan and I just bought a summer house on Cape Cod. 8 bedrooms. Private beach. We're thinking about starting a family soon." I stared at her. My mother was lying in a casket 20 feet away, and she was bragging about real estate? "Congratulations," I said, my voice flat. "I just thought you should know how well we're doing," she continued, her voice dripping with venom. "Poor you, still alone after all these years. I got the man, the money, and the mansion. I won, Rebecca." And in that moment, the calmest feeling washed over me. Because looking at her desperate need to prove herself, I realized she hadn't won anything. I smiled. A genuine, pitying smile. "Have you met my husband yet?" Her face faltered. "Husband." I opened the door and waved Zachary over. "Zachary, darling, come meet my sister." Zachary stepped into the room, looking tall, calm, and effortlessly commanding. Nathan was right behind him, clearly eavesdropping. And this was the moment. Nathan looked at Zachary, and his face drained of all color. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Foster," Nathan choked out. The arrogance evaporated instantly. Zachary looked at him with a cool, professional nod. "Reynolds. It's been a long time. Not since my firm acquired Initech instead of your client, right?" The air left the room. Stephanie looked between them, panic rising in her eyes. You know each other?" "Zachary Foster," she whispered, the realization hitting her like a truck. "As in?" "Foster Investments." "The same," Zachary said, slipping his arm around my waist. "Rebecca and I have been happily married for 2 years." Nathan looked like he was going to be sick. He stammered something about collaborations, but Zachary shut him down with a polite, firm refusal. We walked out of that room, leaving them standing in stunned silence. The power dynamic had flipped in 10 seconds flat. The funeral ended and Zachary had to fly back to Chicago for work, but I stayed behind to help Dad. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Stephanie. She was alone. No diamonds. No Nathan. Just a small, trembling woman standing on my porch in the rain. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy between us. Then she broke. "I saw Mom's journal," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Her last wish was for us to fix this. But I don't know how." "Start with the truth," I said. And she did. The floodgates opened. The perfect life was a lie. Nathan was drowning in debt. His business was failing. He was controlling, paranoid, and verbally abusive. The house on Cape Cod? Mortgage to the hilt. The happiness? A performance. I'm miserable, Rebecca, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. I've been miserable since the day I married him. I destroyed our family for a mirage. I'm so sorry. We cried together that afternoon. It wasn't instant forgiveness. You don't fix 6 years of betrayal in a day, but it was a start. She told me she was leaving him. She was filing for divorce, moving into a small apartment, and starting over. 6 months later, I was back in Chicago, painting a nursery soft green. I was pregnant with a baby girl. Stephanie had left Nathan, facing the scandal head-on, and was slowly rebuilding her life. We talk now. It's tentative, but it's real. Losing Nathan felt like the end of my world, but it was actually the beginning. The betrayal forced me to find my own strength. It led me to Zachary, a man who loves me for who I am, not for what I can give him. My mother was right. Forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about cutting the anchor so I could sail away. So, if you're going through hell right now, if you've been betrayed or left behind, please listen to me. This isn't the end of your story. It's just the chapter where you learn how strong you really are. Sometimes, the trash takes itself out to make room for the treasure. Have you ever had a moment where your greatest loss turned out to be your biggest blessing? Tell me in the comments.